Center, the Graduate Center, CUNY in Midtown Manhattan. Again, it's a sunny, hot day in Manhattan where one thinks the asphalt might melt or might leave a footprint on the streets. And it's another day on planet Earth, we think, hopefully a good one. And one of the reasons is, because we have the great puppeteers or people from the world of puppetry with us. It's a great day. We love that art form. We think it is so important, at least in the Western world, often slightly overlooked, even so among real theater people. They are so highly respected and their work is of significance. So we have three great speakers with us. As a little note from the Segal Center side, it's a big day for us too. It's Segal Talk 150. We can't believe it. It's a long series, a little endurance marathon. So we are proud of it. And it was such a privilege to listen over a year now, over a year and a half almost. No, not really yet, but over a year to so many artists from around the world who have made a difference, who are, as Milo Rouse says, agents of change, who have been on the right side of history, the right side on the fight for social justice, and who are also great human beings. One of the things that will come out of this is we will host a 24-hour kind of a marathon with our Indian colleagues who have done so much to help the Indian population around Bangalore and everywhere in India to deal with COVID and the horrific situation in India, and as a symbol to all the theater artists who really helped to make the planet a better place during that time. It might also be coming slowly to an end of our official Corona series or focus on it, but we will continue to talk about theater and art. But as an ending after 150, we will do in July a 24-hour marathon to really raise awareness of the really hard situation that is out there. And Segal Center will always participate. It's also as an announcement on September 5th, the Memorial Day weekend, we will hope to help organize readings all around the city in all 5 boroughs of New York to honor the people who died. We will get 100 little speakers and microphones, and we hope to read letters from people who died, or letters written for them, to them, or imagined letters that might come back inspired by Odile Kate's great work in Rwanda. And so we will also let you all know more about this as our next step to get involved in New York City itself. But let's come back to what is really important and why we are here today. And to everybody out there, again, thank you for listening. If you're catching us today, maybe the first time or for repeated time, it's so great to have had all these listeners. We got so many comments and how meaningful it was for them. Oh, when we made things wrong and we said something that wasn't right and we got corrected, but really we got such a great response, and it helped us to go over. So today we have with us Claudia Orenstein from Hunter College. We have Paulette Richards in Atlanta, and we have Manuel Antonio Moran with us. And I'm going to read a little bit about their bios so we get it behind us of their work. But tell us, where are you now and what time is it where you are in the moment? Paulette, maybe you start.
Yes, I'm sitting in my studio in Atlanta, and it is 12:03 in the afternoon.
Well, that's close to our time. And Manuel, where are you?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I am upstate New York, actually, in Sullivan County. And it's the same time, 12:04 now, actually.
Claudia.
I'm in Manhattan, and it's also, 12:04. And I also just wanted to say bravo to you, Frank, for 150 of these. I
yes.
Well done, well done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like David Blaine territory when he likes being underwater, for a long time. And but I hope it was a small contribution, really, to understanding of the world we were in, and to create some meaning, and it really helped me personally. So let me talk to you all a little bit about our guest today. Manuel Antonio Moran, who's here, was born in Puerto Rico, in San Juan. And he has been actor, singer, writer, composer, puppeteer, theater, and film director. and producer in his home country in Latin America, in Puerto Rico and Europe and the United States. He's a founder and artistic director of SEA, did I say it right?
Yes.
Which is the Society of the Educational Arts, with offices in Puerto Rico, Florida, and New York City. You can look it up on the web. It's teatrosea.org. And for celebrating now 35 years, of existence, and they have made a real difference in the field and offered entertainment alternatives with real cultural and artistic value and educational quality for kids, youth, adult, and through bilingual educational programs, workshops, seminars, theater, and also puppet work. That's something what we will talk about. We have the great also Paulette Richards with us. She's a puppet artist and an independent researcher. She holds a Ph.D. in French civilization from the University of Virginia and has taught at Georgia Tech. She has taught animatronic puppetry workshops at the Friends School of Atlanta and many other places. The Center for Puppetry Arts, Puppeteers of America 2017 Festival. She co-curated Living Objects, African American puppetry exhibits at the Institute and Museum of Puppetry in 2018 and 19. And she is currently curating an exhibit of African American puppetry at the Center for Puppet Arts. And her book, Object Performance in the Black Atlanta, is forthcoming from the great Routledge, a publishing house. And you're also working on a new book, right? You said, and we will hear about it. And she is asking for contributions if anybody is listening. And then we have with us a close friend of the Segal Center, Claudia, who also helped us to put this group together. We have done many events around puppetry together at the Segal Center over a decade. And she's a professor at Hunter College and the Graduate Center. And her publications include Women in Puppetry, Critical and Historical Investigations with Alissa, Mello, and Cariad Astles, the Routledge Companion to Puppetry and Material Performance, a very important book. Encourage everybody also to get it, as he did it with Dassia, Posner, and the great John Bell from the great Small Works. She was a dramaturg for the Wind-Up Broad Chronicle with Tom Lee and Nishikawa Koryū, Shank's Marks, and she's a member of UNIMA-USA, if not one of the main forces actually behind it. She's the associate editor of the Asian Theater Journal, and her current book projects, one of the many things she does, is Thinking Through Puppets, Essays on Puppet Dramaturgy, with Tom Cusack, who also has been often at the Segal, Puppet and Spirit, Religion, Ritual and Performing Objects. And she got a Fulbright, and she is on to go to Japan and research, if I understand right, the work of puppetry and the connection to ritual and a sense of a place in its history of the country. So we can't wait to hear about it. I think it's going to be at the end of the year. So first of you all, welcome. And Paulette, how has been the last year? How was it? What's going on in Atlanta?
Well, first I need to make a small correction.
Yes.
We are aware of the impact that the shelter in place and the coronavirus plague have had on arts institutions such as museums and theaters. And because of the financial hardship, the Center for Puppetry Arts was not actually able to raise enough money to put on the exhibit this at the present moment. But we hope that that may become a reality down the road.
Oh, that's very sad. So the Black Puppetry exhibition is a victim also of Corona time. That's unfortunate, especially for the time we live in. That's really unfortunate that no sponsor was there. So how was that year for you?
Well, it's actually been, ironically, a very productive year for me. I sort of put my head down during the shelter in place and read a very tall stack of books on African-American theater history, because I was looking for object performance in African-American theater history. And then I was asked to speak about that topic in the Ballard Institute's Puppetry Forum series in the early June, just a few days after the murder of George Floyd. And since then, I have felt a really strong commitment to research that I never had before, because the work that I'm doing feels relevant for the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm looking particularly at object performance as a strategy of resistance to the objectification of Black bodies.
No, that is said. About how much money is it all about? What's missing? Maybe someone is listening. And, who should they contact, you or?
I would direct them to contact Beth Chavo, who is the executive director of the Center for Puppetry Arts
in
Atlanta.
In Atlanta itself. So really, this
Yes.
is important, an important exhibition, and important research, and it's quite devastating next to everything that happened. That also that exhibition that was already planned, I guess, a year ago or two, did not materialize. And Manuel, tell us a bit about you and your experience of the last year.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here again. It's been a tough year. It's been a very tough year. I'm a practitioner. I run a theater company, as everybody heard with my bio, and the theater basically has been closed for a year and a half. And even though they say in April that we can open 30%, it wasn't really cost effective to open the theater, especially small theaters. I have a black box theater in Manhattan for 150 people, so 30%. Sometimes I will get even more people on stage and backstage than on the audience, so I feel that we decided to move the reopening of the theater for later on in August, where we are producing this major festival that is called the International Puppet Fringe Festival. It's the second edition. It's been
Let's just slow down. It's called the Puppet Fringe Festival. I never heard of a Fringe festival for puppets. Is that the first?
It's the first one. We had our first edition in 2018. It was very successful. Then we planned it. It's a biennial festival, so we planned it for 2020. But as you know, everything was canceled. So this year we decided that we were going to do it and to re-invite everyone who applied and all that. And we decided to do a hybrid festival, which is going to be half virtual and half presential. So it's going to be from August 11th to the 31st. The presential part is going to be at the Lower East Side in our theater at the Clemente.
Where is it located, your theater, exactly?
It's on the Lower East Side, on the Lower East Side of Barrio. It's on Suffolk Street between Delancey and Rivington. It's at the center called the Clemente, which is a Puerto Rican Latino cultural center that we have 4 theaters, 3 galleries, and also it's the home of more than 60 artists. Multicultural, artists from not only Latinos and Puerto Ricans, but from all over the world. It's a wonderful place, and the festival is a perfect place for the festival. So what we decided to do this year is that we're going to have the international component being online, because many of these companies obviously cannot travel. And we have curated and put together an amazing festival for, it's going to be like our real comeback to the theater. With more than 40 events during the first week of the festival, but going back to the coronavirus and the pandemic, I wanted to mention that our company was hit pretty hard. We lost actors and puppeteers in our company.
Actors lost their lives.
Yes, and also we lost family members as well. It has been very devastating, to say the least. Very sad. Also in the Latino theater movement of the city, also other companies were hit with the same. So the minority communities, as you know, were hit very bad with coronavirus, especially the Lower East Side, which is our immediate community. So it's been, not only dealing with the fact that, you know, financially has been devastating, trying to maintain a theater that is not operating. You know, we lost 90% of our contracts. We didn't do performances that generated money for the theater. But at the same time, you know, I had to make decisions with the staff. You know, some people lost their jobs because we couldn't, you know, we had to keep paying rent. We had to keep paying utilities. You had to keep paying, you know, insurance. So it's really a tough time. And even though we have applied and to many of the relief funds and the loans and all that, it's still not enough when you lose 90% of your contracts, when you're operating with 40% of your staff. It's being challenging. And on top of that, all the emotional burden that the pandemic have put on all of us. I mean, I have been even having workshops with my staff, my immediate staff dealing with, you know, depression and, you know, and a lot of things that are difficult and that we need to deal with. Now, finally, like 3 weeks ago, we got back to rehearse. And it was a very emotional moment for everybody to be outdoors rehearsing. We rehearsed the whole production outdoors for 3 weeks, and everybody with their mask. And even though the majority of the people have been vaccinated, we still, you know, we have to continue with all the restrictions and all that, taking care of everybody. And it was very emotional that first day. Everybody was like crying, and even myself, when I talked to my cast for the first time a year and a half, it was a happy moment, but at the same time, a very big, I mean, a sad moment at the same time, that we have not seen each other for a year and a half. But I have great news. We actually went back to the streets. First of all, we did a lot of things online. Before I was talking, you were talking about, like, you know, you have good lighting and everything. You know, we're experts already with Zoom, because we have been operating with Zoom, you know, all the time. So I would say that we have done more than 200 programs during this pandemic. We opened a YouTube channel that is called SEA Kids Network. If you can check it out, please. It's SEA Kids Network, and please subscribe. We've been doing a lot of great things for the kids in Spanish and English and for the community. But then we decided to go back to the streets. We went to the origins of, you know, of theater too, you know. So last Friday, we premiered a new show that was conceived by me and written, and not only that, I made the puppets, which I have not done puppets in 30 years. You know, it was kind of like therapeutic during the time of, you know, of the pandemic. I started, you know, taking some online courses and start working with new materials. I learned about this material called Warbler, which I have never worked with. And I created many puppets, and those are the puppets that premiered last Friday. And now we're doing a tour, a city tour, a street tour of New York for the whole summer.
What's the play about? Very shortly.
Called Los Grises, the gray ones, and it's a homage to all the elderly people that we have lost. So it's 8 vignettes with 8 puppets. They're all painted and dressed in gray. That's why it's called, you know, the gray ones, and also it's because of many different things. It's a great period, and, you know, the age, everything, you know. So it's 8 seniors, and you know, we have 8 vignettes related to their common life, you know, prior to the pandemic, and then
amazing. What happened. So it's one of the first things that came out and was shown. Paulette, to come back to you before we come to Claudia, how is the feeling? How is the mood in Atlanta during the year? Puppet work, you know, Manuel did say, you know, that so many community members, you know, were lost in his field. How is it there?
I think that our guild, the Atlanta Puppetry Guild, kind of rallied during the pandemic. We have had, we usually have a difficult time scheduling meetings because everyone is busy and off in this and that and the other direction. But people were really feeling the need to see each other. And so we had several Zoom meetings throughout the year that were very uplifting. We've had some excellent speakers. We had Leslie Carrera Rudolph at the last one. And while things were looking bleak at the beginning of the pandemic, because of course everyone lost all of their bookings, people have very resourceful, and they found other ways to perform. And like Manuel, a lot of people, immerse themselves in making new puppets or writing new shows. And so I think people are kind of ready to tentatively move forward. Yes.
Did you research in the time, about the Black puppetry? I don't know enough about it. Maybe you share a little bit. What did you discover anyway, and how that you said it took on a new meaning and urgency?
Yes. So when we did the Living Objects African American Puppetry exhibit, we were trying to fill a hole in knowledge of American puppetry in general. And the first thing we did was, let's see if we can find connections between African object performance and African American puppetry. And we dig and we dig and we dig, and we could not substantiate that in the material culture record. And that is because slaveholders outlawed the creation of figurative objects that represented an African worldview. So the kinds of masks and articulated figures that Africans were performing with, people would have been severely punished if they tried to create that while they were enslaved. The other reason that we couldn't find direct connections is that puppetry is a community building practice in traditional African society. And slavery was a complete destruction of all social institutions. So, and then not only were they destroyed because people were removed from their societies, but also when they arrived in the New World, the last thing that the slaveholders wanted was for them to rebuild social networks, because you use those to organize revolts. So with the exception of places in the Caribbean where syncretism with the Catholic Church enabled people to use, the public rituals of the Catholic calendar to participate in object performance traditions, there wasn't a direct connection through the material culture. But as I researched, when I had my head down in that big pile of books during the shelter in place, I started to see that there were connections in the storytelling performance complex. Some of the stories survived the Middle Passage because they were in people's heads. And also in the whole just performance context, when, where, how, the way that you speak, the way that you move, the music, those elements did survive. And I could then start tracing the material culture practice, not through things that we would call theater, but through spirituality. And so I'm currently digging deeper into traditions such as Santeria and Vodun and Candomblé, and the kinds of private altars that people kept in their houses or their yards, that the larger society wasn't always aware of what the meaning was. But those are places where I'm starting to find connections between the object performance of African Americans and Africans in the material culture. I hope that answers some of your questions.
No. This is important, and we all do not know enough. That's why this exhibition is, I think, so important. Claudia, thanks for waiting. You have one of the foremost researchers, if not the foremost researcher in the world on puppetry, contemporary theory and practice. and you have so many global collections. Tell us, what has that year meant to puppeteers, to the art form itself, the year of Corona, and where are we now?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I guess I should say that there's a lot of really fabulous researchers out there, and some of them are sitting here with me today in the world of puppetry. And actually, that's what I find kind of exciting, is that it's a growing field, and there's just, it's kind of opened up in a way that there are, partly has to do with new scholarship on material culture and materiality, object-oriented ontologies, these kinds of critical discussions that have become kind of popular in so many disciplines, are bringing people to different perspectives on puppetry, or things very close to, related to, and integral to puppetry, like what Paulette has just been describing. I think in terms of the year, in relationship to puppetry in this COVID year, at the very beginning, there was a real sense, I mean, obviously the disappointment and the, just sort of grief, I think, of everybody who had lost, their art for so long. So there's been this mix and a kind of journey, I think. I guess I would say that, Paulette and Manuel are all part of UNIMA, this international organization of puppetry arts, which is really important. And we also work with UNIMA-USA, the USA branch of that. And there's also a group called Puppeteers of America. And all these organizations really came together to raise money for puppeteers, to, find ways of supporting them, helping them transition to doing online kinds of work, to have support groups. And although I'm not a performer, I was really inspired to be part of that. And you just felt like this really big community trying to find ways to come together. And sometimes, like, there were even sessions, UNIMA organized a big online session for people like myself who teach. And I, in fact, taught a puppetry class at Hunter in the fall online, and it was a real discussion of, I don't want to say completely, but you found a lot of older puppeteers who have, it was much more difficult for them to transition to online things, really feeling very dejected about the whole situation. And then other people, and they tended to be more younger puppeteers, but not always, saying, well, there are these other opportunities. Let's find where the opportunities are, how, what we can explore while we have this moment, and exploring new kinds of animation and things online. And people talking about the fact that, puppetry, because it can, use this idea of animation and different kinds of scale, or that it can be two-dimensional and still be interesting, had a kind of advantage over some forms of acting that were going on, online on Zoom. And so there was a lot of exploration and kind of things that had happened before more locally, like puppet slams or puppet cabarets, where lots of people just give short performances. There were international ones. And I think the first one that happened was Great Small Works organized this online toy theater festival. And what I remember about it was, people are writing in the chat, and everybody was just like, so excited to feel like we were together in that moment and seeing everybody's work and all this, and just, that sense, it really underlined for me the way in which puppetry is also so much about creating a community of people who are invested in this work. And I always say that, like, people in puppetry are like the most wonderful people I've ever met, and maybe it has to do with being able to, like, give yourself over to something else in performance, give yourself over to an object or another character, but this sort of outpouring of support. And then a lot of investigation into social justice issues. And I think, every organization that I know, giving online panels and talks and discussions, really supporting puppeteers of color and offering more opportunities and ways to, to support them and make puppetry feel, hopefully be more inclusive and diverse. I mean, it is diverse, but, to feel that way and feel supportive to people in the art from all different kinds of backgrounds, especially here in the US. One thing that has been happening, there's something UNIMA does called the World Encyclopedia of Puppetry Arts, which was a book that originally that was started years ago, and it took like UNIMA 20 years to put it together. And by the time it came out, it was huge and already like out of date because it took them 20 years to put it together. So Karen Smith, a wonderful member of UNIMA-USA, who's now the new president of UNIMA, she was put in charge of putting it all online and updating it. So that's been a kind of ongoing process. And, you know, really the Black Lives Matter movement and all of this discussion has kind of jump-started this sense of, you know, we need to look at what the USA entries are there and really make representation of the wonderful puppeteers of color who have been involved in the art for a long time, like, but where are they? Why are they not there? And so that's really something important that's being worked on in a sort of scholarly way.
Well, that's quite an update. I sense some optimism and some, you know, kind of national and global connection, you know, that so you have a tight network in a way, and that's proved to be important this time. So my question to Manuel and Paulette, did something change? Also, do you feel there is a change happening, something in the field, the attention that what Claudia talked about, the kind of socially engaged art and paying more attention to who? Do you both think that took place?
I think that, you know, people are starting to get aware, you know, awareness about this issue. I've been in this field for a while, and I have, as loud as I am and as active as I am, I have felt like I was invisible for, you know, for many years. Even though I was in the leadership, I was the president of UNIMA-USA, I was the vice president of UNIMA International. Still, you know, it was like very, it was like them and the little one of us here trying to say, hello, I'm here, you know, remember the Puppeteers of Color, or the, you know, and this new, you know, social justice, it's not new, it's being, you know, but at least it took like the protagonist role in media and all that, have really made aware of many people in the field that, hey, you know, we've been here for a long time, we need to be recognized, we need to be included in, you know, in the research, we need to be, you know, history is important. And then all of a sudden, you know, we start, you know, I've been talking about Pura Belpré, the first Puerto Rican librarian in the United States, and the first recorded Afro-Puerto Rican in, you know, in puppetry in the United States from the 1920s, 1930s. Her work is unbelievable. And finally, some people are paying attention and including her name in some stuff. So it's, yes, it's changing, but we have a long way to go. And I feel that now people, you know, it's trendy. So let's talk about social justice. Is that, you know, the whole thing about, you know, the new administration, which I applaud, you know, that they are putting this into the front page. But one thing is to say it, the other thing is to really be inclusive. The other thing is to be really fair, to bring equity to the whole situation. I could tell you tons of stories
Tell one.
throughout my career.
Tell us a story.
From you know, from people, producers, or, you know, shows that have been very successful of my shows and everything, to tell me my audience is too American for this, or like that, too American, or you know, like, I mean, what does that mean? I'm American, you know. So I can tell you many different stories that I don't want to go into this right now, but I mean, it's like, as a person of color, as an artist of color, as an activist, because I believe that my theater and the work that I do and my writings and everything is very political. It has been to bring some kind of visibility to my people and to our, you know, to the Latino culture in my case, you know, who has been here forever, you know. And it's very political, the work I do, even the work I do for children. I mean, cultural preservation, that's a political action. And that's basically one of the things that I'm doing. So yeah, I feel that there's a long way to go, but finally, you know, hopefully we're going to stop being the poster child or the poster boy or the token boy or the Latino. You know, it's been like that for many years. And it's been like that because I've been like, hey, I'm here, or going like this, you know, doing so much in order for people to you know, to have a space. So yeah, I'm sorry if I sound a little, you know, there's a lot of frustration.
No, that's important. We would like to hear that. Actually, I would like to hear those stories, you know, what you experienced, you know, if we have the time. But how do you feel the moment?
Well, I feel like I came into puppetry at just the right time. And I want to thank Manuel for being there, leading the charge, because I started in 2015. I went to the Puppeteers of America Festival for the first time in 2015, and I got to see Manuel perform his Pinocchio, which is, it's set on the Mexican border, and it uses the story to talk about all the immigration issues that we're still struggling with today. And I was so blown away. I went back to my dorm room, and out of like plastic bottles and plastic bags, I made a little necklace. This is also a recycled, this is paper bags and plastic bags braided together, but I made a little necklace and I presented it to him just because I appreciated his work so much. So he's been there in the vanguard all this time. So when I walk into puppetry, people were ready to receive me, uplift me, support me. John Bell, you know, he has been such a phenomenal mentor. And I therefore like to focus on the successes and the tradition of openness that there has been in our puppetry organizations from the beginning. So I did a little homework before this talk, and I looked up Joseph Scupa and Jan Malik, who during the Nazi occupation in what is in present day Czech Republic, they were using their puppet shows to critique the regime and to give their audience hope. And Scupa ended up being arrested in 1944. But that shows how well puppetry lends itself to this kind of social justice activism. Scupa was also elected president of UNIMA in 1933, and his career exemplifies the organization's mission of fostering international friendship through the art of puppetry. Here again, I appreciate Manuel's leadership. I took the opportunity to attend the recent UNIMA World Congress, which would have been in Bali last year, and I had no hope of raising the money to travel that far, but it was online, and Manuel did an excellent job of sort of herding all the cats who were new to the online format and managing the voting and everything. I was not a voting counselor, so I just got to sit back and observe. But one of the benefits of doing it in that format is that for the first time, a large number of delegates from Latin America and Africa were able to attend and make their voices heard. And so, in fact, they raised the proposal and we all voted to make the conference accessible virtually in the future so that those who cannot travel physically can still participate. I also want to talk a little bit about P of A's work in what we're calling equity, diversity, and inclusion, because these conversations were arising in the organization before 2020. And in 2019, at the National Festival, which happened to be in Minneapolis that year, they brought in an outside consultant to conduct a conversation with anybody, any member who wanted to attend about equity, diversity, and inclusion issues. And then from that conversation, the organization, began to formulate some plans for addressing those issues. So they created a diversity, equity, and inclusion commission, which I'm part of. And then because I was elected to the board of UNIMA-USA in 2020, now I am UNIMA's liaison to the EDI committee. So P of A and UNIMA work on that together. We've done a number of programs this past year, including a panel that Edna Bland and I did at the joint World Puppetry Day celebration. And so, like I said, thanks to people like Manuel, I walked into puppetry at just the right moment so that the organizations were already moving in this direction. And unlike maybe some other arts organizations I know of that have just kind of jumped on the bandwagon because of the incidents of the past year, these questions were already on the table in P of A.
So that's great. The puppeteers were, you know, in a way ahead of the curve. Claudia, worldwide, it seems puppetry is gaining attention by theater makers, you know, whether it's avant-garde or the established classical, you know, theater world. Why do you think?
Oh, well, I have a lot of thoughts about that. I mean, I think, you know, I mean, a couple of reasons. One of them is that I think we're living right now in such a time of visual culture, you know, that we're so visually inundated. My sister, I always mention, I can mention her today, she's a head of drawings and prints at the Metropolitan, but her field is 17th century Dutch prints. And one of the things I always admire is that she's able to look at a print and she can sort of say where this artist went and what they saw, because there were so few images around. Like if you went to Rome and you saw, you know, some gorgeous sculpture by, you know, one of the famous artists at the time, you know, you would sketch it, and then those kind of forms would, you know, end up in your imagery. But we are just like inundated with imagery all the time, and with video and internet and computers. And so I feel like one reason that puppetry is really becoming an art that's like in so many different forms of performance is because when people go to the theater now, like they sort of are so conditioned by all this other, you know, animated, you know, things that we want to see, you know, something that's, you know, that's our expectation, and so much about art, you know, our art world in general. So I think that's a really strong reason. I think our international exposure to cultures around the world where puppetry has maybe had a more central place, and other kinds of forms of performance that are, you know, have masks and objects or very stylized performance, I think attunes us to that. And I also think, you know, we're at a moment of, well, there's also this, you know, explosion of things in, you know, robotics and things like that, other ways of thinking about, or cyber, you know, characters thinking about our bodies and, you know, created bodies and, you know, what that means. So I think it's a place that people are investigating. They're using puppetry, or in some ways, to investigate what it means to be human right now. And also, I would say, finally, our relationship to the natural world, because we're creating so many, you know, constructed things, you know, that are piling up on our everywhere in all of our natural environment. And so we have to deal with these things. So we're so used to dealing with things and objects all the time. And our, you know, cell phones and things are objects that we kind of carry around with us that sort of like become part of us, you know, and part of our extra brains we carry. And, you know, so we're so inundated in a world that is resonant with ideas of puppetry. But I guess I also want to say that there have been other moments, historical moments, like the turn of the 19th, 20th century, where artists have been very interested in puppetry and the culture has. But I think the underlying cultural issues and ideas that were being wrestled with and discussed were different, you know, and puppets, because of their place to be, you know, sort of akin to humans, but also reflecting technology, having materiality, you know, they form a nexus of ideas, or a nexus of materials and associations that you can use to explore ideas, you know, different sets of ideas. So I think our cultural moment is interested in puppets for a different reason, but it's because puppetry, you know, can offer all of these different things. But I actually want to, can I add something? Because, yes. You know, when Paulette was talking before about looking into ritual objects and use of puppets in that. One of the, you mentioned at the beginning that I'm co-editing with Tim Cusack, this 2-volume set of anthologies on, it's called Puppet and Spirit, Ritual, Religion, and Performing Objects. And Paulette has something in there. And we're just starting to get these essays in. And it's really exciting. I mean, some of the essays are, about traditional forms that have a long history of using puppets and performing objects as a way of negotiating with the divine in a variety of ways. But also what we're finding, and I think it's also part of my inspiration for wanting to do this book to begin with, is especially academics wanting a way to talk about, and a place to talk about something like a spiritual experience in the theater or with objects, or other kinds of uncanniness. And, what is a good theoretical way to do that? And it's a whole part of puppetry that has always been a part of puppetry, but I also feel hasn't been given enough attention. And yet when you start to talk to puppeteers, they get really excited because, they're dealing with their characters that feel like living objects, and that there's a spirit there. And there's all this world of association and reference and experience that we're trying to give some articulation to, and make that, that's also, it's not just something that they do in a particular tradition somewhere, far away, but it's something that really imbues the art in so many different ways. And we've got both, we're talking about traditional forms, contemporary forms. So I just also think that in terms of why we might be interested in puppetry, that this is also something that needs to be discussed. And especially at a time when there's really a lot of religious conflict in the world right now. And so this is maybe another way of thinking through that.
Mm. Yeah, wow, that's quite a big concept to think through it. And I think we mentioned it earlier, Heinrich von Kleist, who wrote this essay on the marionette theater, he said perhaps puppetry is a way, a backdoor to get back into that Garden of Eden, that state of innocence, that paradise for that moment, while you look at it and you experience something, in that sense of divine. And as you said, so, but Manuel, we start with you. Why puppetry? We read your bio, you did so much. Why do you believe through puppets you can express the world or give meaning to, for you or others?
I actually think that the animated objects are magical, or create this kind of relationship with the audience. My work mostly is for young audiences, but also I do puppetry for adults, for seniors. For goodness sake, the seniors, they react to the puppets in an amazing way, and there's kind of like a connection. And I believe it's because it breaks down barriers. There's, the puppet, it's what it is, a special thing that we breathe life to it, and then the audience or the connects with that, and it's kind of breaking, because it feels that there's a new reality that they are living. This is my own theory based on being a practitioner for so many years, that I just see. And it was actually my own experience. I always tell this, that my first contact with puppetry, with live puppetry, was when I was in 3rd grade back in Vega Baja, Puerto Rico, my hometown, in my schoolyard, when a troupe like mine came to perform a show that included puppets, actors, live musicians. It was a beautiful set and everything. I remember vividly, because it was what really changed my life. It gave a purpose to my life. And that was very, I was mesmerized. And it was kind of like this personal relationship that I had with what was happening on stage and what those objects that were being animated. So that passion, or what changed in me at that moment, that I knew exactly when I was in 3rd grade what I wanted to do, And I told my mom, you know, and she, thank God I have a wonderful mom that helped me start making puppets and, you know, encouraging me and you know, and all that. But that moment, I still feel it and treasure it. And I'm hoping and I believe that I've been provoking the same thing in many, many people, not only in kids, but also in adults. And I believe it's because the puppet being one of the major elements in that. And I'm a theater person. I do, you know, like theater without puppets, you know, musicals, everything, you know. But as a creator, I always like to include the object because I believe the experience is more complete. I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I feel that theme that provokes the puppetry between the audience and the object, it's something that you cannot achieve with just an actor. I believe that. I mean, that's my own theory. Anyway, that's what I think I'm trying to achieve every day. And actually, that's basically what my company is called SEA. SEA is a Spanish verb. It means it's an invitation to be. I want to, you know, to provoke change in society. I want to, you know, empower kids. I want to invite them to be whatever they want to be, you know. And so even from the name of the company reflects the mission of what I'm trying to do with my puppets, with my singing, with my acting, with my writing. And so, yes, I think puppetry, that's why it's so important for the work that I do.
Thank you. Paulette, what comes to your mind?
Oh boy. Okay. Since Claudia opened the door, I'm going to walk through. And I'm going to say that for me, puppetry is a healing art, and that particularly with a spiritual power. So as I was saying, this thread about puppetry and social justice was bubbling up before the events of this past year. Even before we began planning the Living Objects exhibit, there were African-American artists using puppetry to draw attention to violence against Black bodies. So Tarish Pipkins had developed a show called Just Another Lynching, and Nefri Ameni had done a piece called Food for the Gods. And the image of one of the masks from that show became the image on most of the promotional materials for the Living Objects exhibit. So I had been engaged to co-curate the show with Dr. John Bell. And when they made the decision to put that image on the promotional materials, I understood what I was doing in a completely different way, because our conception of violence against Black bodies in the present moment has mostly to do with police violence against Black bodies. But my own experience connects with something that is not frequently addressed, which is the rate of missing persons in the Black community. We are 13% of the US population, and I think around 30% of the reported missing persons. A lot of our people who go missing also are not reported missing because our communities have difficult relationships with the police. And so they don't want to talk to the police when something like this happens. Children that I played with as a child went missing. I grew up not in Atlanta, but Atlanta is another site of a deep tragedy of missing children. And so for me, when this mask showed up on the promotional materials for the Living Objects exhibit, I'm like, okay, this whole show is, then I can make this a devotion for all of those missing bodies. And the puppets in that gallery space for me became effigies. Because when people go missing, then there's no closure. You don't have a funeral. You can't celebrate their life because you don't know whether they're dead or not yet. But when we did the show and we had the festival in conjunction with the show, there was singing, there was dancing, there was storytelling. And for me, that laid to rest a whole group of sort of wandering souls. And I meant that not just at the level of the children that I knew, but at the level of all across the country, all across African American experience in this country. It was a way of laying those spirits to rest. So yes, puppetry for me is it's a spiritual healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very powerful statement. Just yesterday we had Sasapin Sirivanij from Thailand, from Bangkok, and she said her motivation to have created BIPAM, an organization of 10, 11 countries from the Southeast Asia region, was, of the missing people, missing bodies, also that, so there is a theme here, and she also talked about, the objects and also puppet theater. Could you all give us some information? We do not know enough about the puppetry world, but who do you look up to? What are theater artists, puppet artists that have influenced you, maybe about shows or scenes, how something connects? So can you tell us, what are your points of references?
Well, I guess I go first.
Yeah.
Well, like I mentioned the work of Pura Belpré, which, it's really, even being from Puerto Rico and born and raised in Puerto Rico, I didn't know about Pura Belpré until I moved to New York to come to school here, which is another big thing that, how can we do not know about our own people? So I was performing at a school in the city, and a teacher told me, "Oh, you are the new Pura Belpré." And that's how I said, the new Pura Belpré. Who was Pura Belpré? And then, if you don't know, please Google it right now. This amazing Afro-Latina pioneer. She's actually part of my documentary. I have a three-episode documentary called Puppetry in the Hispanic Caribbean. And her story is fantastic. And at the same time, when I started learning about her, there's a national award for a children's publication in the United States called Pura Belpré. There's a lot of things. So her work doing storytelling with puppetry, it's really one of my, I started researching her, and I think it's one of my inspirations, especially for the work that I do here in New York. Another big inspiration, and of course I'm a scholar, my dissertation was about him, is Leopoldo Santiago Lavandero, which was like the father of theater education in Puerto Rico. He was the founder of the Department of Dramas in the University of Puerto Rico. He was the founder of the theater program and the arts program in the school system in Puerto Rico. And he was actually, he taught at Yale University, last century, and in the theater school. He was and then he went back to Puerto Rico. It's a Puerto Rican pioneer as well. He was a teacher of Paul Newman. Things like that people do not know. So the work that he did, and I had the pleasure, like he was on 90 something, was suffering already from Alzheimer, but I was able to interview when I was in my 20s. And I have that, and that was a special moment because I was able to, hear from him, here and there when he would remember things and meet this amazing man. And he definitely has been my inspiration. My work, if you see the work that I do, is based on the work that he did at large scale in obviously in the schools and in the educational system in Puerto Rico. Puppeteers, I would say, obviously, the great Jim Henson was also a very big inspiration for me, because as a kid, the only puppetry that I will see in television, you know, was basically the Muppets and, you know, the Sesame Street, even the Spanish version, Plaza Sésamo, all that. So I think that was very inspiring. And of course, all the pioneers of the Puerto Rican puppetry movement in Puerto Rico, they also had a big influence in me, and it's all that part of my documentary as well. Yes, that's my inspiration.
Paulette?
Okay, well, I will follow Manuel and say that Jim Henson is one of my biggest inspirations. I have been a docent in the Worlds of Puppetry Museum at the Center for Puppetry Arts since it opened the new wing in 2015. The museum has a global gallery and a Henson gallery. And I always start the tour in the Henson gallery by asking people if they know when and where Jim Henson was born. And then I raise the question of how, coming from Mississippi in the 1930s, he developed a career that emphasized tolerance for all kinds of people. Everything that he did was about that. And so I have deepest admiration for him.
Claudia, what companies, what artists do you follow also globally? Who are, you know, you wrote this great book with others of with your colleagues, of course, but who are artists?
I'm looking at, like, maybe I should also say a little bit how I came to puppetry, you know, because it's, I guess it's, I loved, you know, Muppets growing up and all, but I think what really inspired me, I did a lot of street theater. When I was a kid, I did street theater with the Theater for the New City downtown in New York. I was one of the few kids performing. There were a lot of masks and, you know, very stylized theater. I wrote my dissertation, which got published as a book, on the San Francisco mime troupe that used not only stylized theater, but they also had a whole political puppetry wing of their political performance, using kind of a radical punch puppet, you know, who went around telling you how you could, you know, not have to pay the parking meters and things like that. And I also have always been writing about Asian theater, and Asian theater has a lot of puppetry in it. So I've been inspired by all of those. But I think what really got me kind of plunged into the world of puppetry were the Henson festivals that went on in downtown New York in the early 2000s. And they were really puppetry from all over the world. So companies like Handspring Puppet Company, you've interviewed, there were some Czech companies, and doing work that was not for children necessarily. There were some children companies, but, you know, seeing what I just thought was the most inspiring theater to me at the time. A company from, I guess, Argentina, El Periférico de Objetos, if I say that right, you know, and things that made me stop and question, like, how am I watching this? Or, as I say, how am I being asked to watch this? And that were showing things, you know, that tools that I had for scholarly analysis were not, you know, applying here. You know, you could have gorgeous language, but it didn't fit with the puppet. And, you know, puppets were doing things that were interesting in their own right. And I was really trying to search for, you know, ways to talk about this. So I think the puppetry that really inspires me, and I think I see it in a lot of companies. You know, Manuel Cinema, of course, is wonderful. Tori Bend is an artist I like a lot. Are people who are in the work they're doing also exploring the form and showing how materiality can be expressive on stage in different ways, and where the surprises are and the plots are also expressing something about puppetry and material performance. So actually, in that other book I'm writing, hopefully, on essays on puppetry, I'm trying to sort of offer things that I've been thinking about for a while, seeing over a large range of puppetry. Even a puppeteer like Henk Borwinkel, Dutch puppeteer, who used to perform a lot. There's a wonderful moment in he's a fabulous puppet work. He's not performing anymore, I think his son is, but of this, these small vignettes that are accompanied by music and very visual and surreal and poetic. And in this one, there's like a big head, and it's the top of the head opens up, and there's a little puppet that comes out of the head, and it starts to churn his brain, and it takes off the bandage around the head and wraps it on this pole. And then there's this moment where we just watch the bandage unravel off the pole. And to me, like, that's so expressive. It's not what we think of when we think of a puppet, but it's in a world of puppetry where we're understanding that material can be alive and express something on stage. And so we're watching it differently. So I guess rather than, I think there are a lot of puppeteers exploring these ideas right now. In fact, it's become almost vernacular in the puppetry world. And that's why I feel like it's an exciting world of performance. So there are a lot of companies, but I said a few of them. I love Paper Moon Puppet Theater. And I think what's so lovely about that company too is the great spirit, personal spirit in which they do work and create community. So I think that's also a strong part of it. So I don't know if that not completely pointing to a number of like, here's the
no, yeah, just to know, yeah.
But
no, Ria, she was here from Paper Moon, and she said during Corona, people could give $50 or something and ask the company to create a short puppet play for someone. They would interview the person, talk to create something for the person. A very radical idea, actually, that someone from the audience gives a little bit of money, ask the company not to fulfill their ideas, and say, let's say, who would you like to give this show to? Let's call that person into a nurse or a grandfather, and then they created something. They also did a project where they sent, I think, puppet building material in a box to a home, and then give it like instruction how to do it, and then they asked them to do a little story, and then they would put up the video. They, by the way, also did a big talk series, a little bit like ours, with puppeteers from around the world. So we at the Segal often also do talk about dramaturgy and the importance of dramaturgical thinking, and the art form of theater performance and puppetry is part of that world, and not just the entertainment, but there also, of course, has to be. But is there kind of a new dramaturgy evolving? Do you guys notice something where you say, the puppet theater is moving into fields? We had Hotel Moderne here, and they did, a show where they built a model of a concentration camp with little puppets and tiny cameras moved through the camp, and it was projected on a big screen. Also very innovative, incredible. I'm sure Carol Martin introduced us to them. So are you feeling, or even that year now in Corona, are there new things emerging? Are you observing new forms or new engagements that are surprising?
Well, I think not too surprising, but is certainly happening. I mean, so many puppeteers spent this year exploring digital technology and other kind of technological ways they can create things, and are interested in integrating that in their work. There was already, I think, a lot of it happening, and I would say, for me, like, animation is within the world of the, animation and, CGI and those kind of things, that they're so related to the world of puppetry that there's an automatic kind of connection. And you saw a lot of puppet shows where there'd be then projections. Even Handspring Puppet Company's early work with William Kentridge, or their projections and animations and live puppets. And so there's this sort of landscape. But it will be interesting, I think. I don't know exactly which direction it's going, but it will be interesting to see where that goes in the future, now that people have spent so much time. And I think, a lot of, like I say, not just on being online, but exploring what can I do with this new tool.
Manuel, are you seeing things for your festival, for your upcoming that are different?
Yes. There's obviously the use and the integration of technology is something big that is happening in puppetry. And of course, the pandemic and the time, being at home have added to that, because that's our tool to use it right now. I am actually encouraging people to do that, and also when I'm curating a festival, I'm trying to find a combination of both. I mean, puppetry is still a traditional art form, And for me, a preservation of the art form is also very important. The development of it too, and the, you know, like the evolution of it is important. But I also think that the new generations should be exposed to the wonders of the past as well, you know? So I want to create, and this is what's happening also in my own work, a balance in, you know, some shows that I do are very heavy technology, you know, like with projections with, you know, like cameras and all that kind of thing, and amazing like LED lighting and all that kind of thing. And then other ones, I really want the essence of what it was before, or to show people, to recreate a period. I remember just doing, you know, we do some of our shows are Latinized European children's stories. You know, like, so we did a Little Red Riding Hood, a Latina Little Red Riding Hood, and it was very interesting, integrated actors, puppets, and everything. But I wanted to do it in the way that I saw children's theater when I was a kid, with, you know, with the backdrops and the forest, you know, very, very, very classical. And everybody, some people say, Manuel, that's very old style. And I say, yes. And that was my purpose as an artist, to recreate a very old style, you know, in a new time, you know. So, and I believe, especially being a repertory theater company like we are, that we, you know, adding new shows or just, you know, revamping old shows and all that, I really, as a creator, try to balance the new stuff, which is fantastic, and I love it, you know, and I'm trying to learn every day and to include it in my work, but at the same time to preserve and to do things in the traditional way. And I think that the artists should try to find that balance, because it's very important, because things in, you know, not everything new it's good always, you know. It's like the old things, you know, are not bad either. So it has to be a balance. And that's what I am using when I'm curating or when I'm creating.
Okay, yeah. So I'm glad that Claudia brought up the word dramaturgy. I'm still relatively young in puppetry and still figuring out what I want to do. I'm not really a performer yet, but as I said in the beginning, this year has made my research seem more relevant and necessary than ever. And as I've been working on my book about object performance in the Black Atlantic, it seems like as soon as I dig something up, I find myself in a conversation with an artist who's like, I need that. And they take it right away. And I've never felt that in academic research before. So an example, there is a lot of discussion and attempt to deal with the legacy of blackface. And so I had been working with an artist named Garland Farwell, who did several shows in the Henson festivals in years of yore. And he had received a grant to do a documentary on Jig Dolls. And if you don't know what a Jig Doll is, it's a figure, a jointed figure like this. And then it usually stands on a board and you make it dance by tapping the board. Unfortunately, a great many of these in the 19th and first half of the 20th century were blackface figures. And so Garland was trying to come to terms with that legacy. And yet another part of the dramaturgy is how do you construct the figure so that it moves the way that you want it to move? And so I made another set because I'd been researching African figures. These are toe puppets. So the string goes around your big toe and then you sit on the ground and manipulate them like this. And I was looking for, you know, any evidence that these types of objects might have been created in African-American communities. Couldn't find it. But this is the kind of exploration that I've been doing and feeding to other artists. As soon, it's literally it seems like every week, I dig something up, I'm in a phone conversation with somebody and they're like, oh, I need that. So that's been a very interesting time in that way.
So you said, you're open for articles and for research. Maybe say a little bit, how people can contact you.
Okay, can I put my email address in the chat?
Sure.
Okay, I am currently co-editing an anthology on race, gender, and disability in object performance with Alissa Mello and Laura Purcell Gates. That volume will be forthcoming from Routledge. Everything's coming from Routledge in 2022. Everything's coming out in 2022, we hope. And we're still taking submissions or proposals for that topic through July 1st. So if anyone out there thinks they have something that would be appropriate, please contact me and I will send you the full call for proposals. Thank you.
Good. And it's Paulette Richards, #3.
Oh, at Gmail. Sorry, let me do that again. Yes.
At Gmail, yeah.
Trying to talk and type at the same time didn't work.
Yeah, I'm impressed that you got it done. So so this is ongoing research. If you have any suggestions, also for Paulette or anyone, you let us know at the Segal Center, or Halron can forward it, or contact them directly. So this is important what we heard, that I think Rancière, the great philosopher, said, new work, new breakthroughs appear on stages on the world when you have a traditional art form and a new technology. Exactly what Manuel talked about, that there's a meeting of these things and something new will come out. And I think this is something we are seeing at the moment. And Paulette, who says, let's look at the history, let's look at these objects. What did they mean at that time and what do they mean now? And let's help to change imagination. The great Edouard Glissant, who also taught at the Grad Center, said, the problems, the racism, the sexism, homophobia, or hate of the foreigners and refugees, it's a problem or a lack of imagination. People cannot imagine, they're not able to. And if there's anything that helps us to imagine different worlds, different possibilities, it is actually theater performance. And also, yes, through puppets, Handspring, Basil Jones said in South Africa, I said, my puppets could say stuff on a stage and didn't have to go to jail. Or people accepted it, it was a puppet, it was ridiculous to sue a puppet, but it made a change, it changed something, and he said the example of the Trinity, like God, Father, and Holy Spirit, how do you paint it? How do you do it? It looks so odd on these oil paintings. But, you have a puppeteer who moves a puppet and the second puppeteer helps. And the puppet looks alive, but they are not alive. But they are the people who are so this moment of confusion, like very complex philosophical context, even, is shown in what you guys would say. So that's a simple way to move a bunraku puppet or whatever, but there is something in there that helps us to understand the world we are in and to create meaning. And I think puppetry, it's a great time. I think it's coming and will be forthcoming, as I do think the work of circus as a great popular art form will also come back. And I think it's shameful how little theater is offered for youth, for kids, small kids, even under 3, 4, 5 teens, the greatest audience you can imagine. How little is out there and offered to them or supported by, there's even a director in Sweden who is actually in the normal life, the director of the National Theater in Stockholm after Bergman, and she does work for infants under 12 months. I mean, it's incredible concept. They're sitting around a carpet and actors move in a way that little babies can see them, just shows you how, and she believes not only is it important for her research for theater, but it will make an imprint. So the work, and children are drawn to this as they are drawn to good theater instinctively, and so I think there is something so important in it, and on all levels. And this is the important subject. We could only touch the top of the iceberg, so I want everybody to know that this is a big universe, as we heard from all the organizations and meetings. What you're involved in, we don't know that, but it sounds great. Sounds like in Star Trek when you hear all these things and we don't understand exactly, but you know it's a world out there, a really good one. So so really all our respect for the work you're doing. I feel it's pioneering work. It's work a bit more in the shadows, but it will emerge. It has such a great history and a significant present, but I think it has an even a greater future, and it's a big honor, to have you with us, and that all three of you came to talk to us. I know we have a little bit less time, but we felt that to represent that global world also we are moving in, and you guys are so pioneering also that you have, these global organizations in puppetry, that there is something to be said for this. So, and I hope you will be able, the listeners, to join us again tomorrow. We completely switch, as Monty Python said, now to something completely different. It will be a two playwrights and the directors from France, and French-African Penda Diop and Marine Bachelot Nguyen, and will talk to us about their work, about what's happening in France at the moment, and how they are experiencing this time, what they are working on, what they are planning. So it's a great change also what is happening. But theaters are slowly reopening, and I hear in July festivals in Germany also will have performances again. So things over there are very different because of the subsidized structure. So I hope everybody got as much inspiration and also in a way joy from this conversation. It was a great one. It's a 150th talk again for us. It was a big day, unimaginable. We never thought that would happen. And we started last March. We thought it might go on for a couple of months because our center was closed. All my programming was canceled. Everything I had carefully put together said, no, you can't get into the building. And so I said, well, then instead of showing all reruns of our talks, which we actually have about 500 to 600 programs, we said we should, really interview, archive the moment. And it ended up maybe the most closest portrait of a profession in the world, around the world, and how it reacted, to the Corona crisis. And so it's something also for future audiences, which might be of interest. So thank you all, goodbye, and thanks to HowlRound for everything. And I hope you will hear more and join us for the 24-hour India reading. And then with the Literaturfestival Berlin, we will do readings in New York City for the death of Corona. Maybe we can collaborate, with the puppeteers and others to make that happen. Thank you all, Paulette, Manuel, and Claudia, especially for help making that happen. This was a really important talk. Thank you. Bye-bye. Stay safe. Bye-bye.